Actually, first off, let me just do this. I want to introduce a little bit to you. The very first thing I have to do is I always have to introduce my family, because they're the reason they helped me get here and all that kind of stuff. My wife was actually she says, "I'm so glad you're going to this," and it's very encouraging when your spouse does that, because sometimes I do things and my wife is not all that excited that I'm doing it, traveling overseas someplace or something like that. This is my family. This is one of our later family photos. So I've got 3 children. My daughter Amy on the far left is 17. She's adopted from China. That's why she looks different. She's 17, and my daughter Jenna just got married in December, so this is her wedding photo. She lives in Oklahoma City. She's a nurse, just graduated from college. And then my wife is next to John Michael, to Jenna's husband, John Michael, and then my son, and then his wife, and they live in Arkansas. And my son Caleb is a graphic web designer, artiste kind of guy, kind of a technical artist, kind of like me. And some of you may kind of fall into that category as well. I just want to say how much I appreciate being here. I'm not an ACT staff member, although I'm a fan, and I've been a fan for many, many years. And I met Byron probably 10 years ago or something at some conference somewhere, and we talk on the phone periodically, and we meet up at conferences and things like that. He and I are actually going to be at a Pioneers conference in January in Chiang Mai, Thailand. My organization that I work with is Pioneers. So it's a mission agency, and I'm a missionary filmmaker. But I feel very, very much at home. I don't really feel like a party crasher when I'm here, because I feel like I'm among my people. Honestly, big mission agency. So Pioneers we got about 3,500 people, 100 and something countries in the world. It's a big organization, very spread out, decentralized. So you don't know many people, but they're traditional missionaries. And there's artists sprinkled among them, but it's a very traditional mission agency. And so when I come here and I'm hanging out with crazy creatives, it's just kind of, I feel like this is my people. So I really appreciate being able to come here. And I want to, I thought about this morning. I stuck these slides in here like an hour or so ago because I thought, well, I should maybe explain a little bit about what I do rather than just launching into my thing. I have a team under Pioneers called 10X Productions, which is a cross-cultural visual storytelling team. But we've sort of morphed my team. I'm a team leader, and we sort of have a few people doing a few odd things, not all of us doing film. And so it's a little bit hard to explain. The other team that I'm a part of, with like a handshake agreement, is International Media Ministries that's based in Madrid, Spain. So I wear all sorts of hats. I'm going to wear this hat. This is my filmmaker's uniform. It's a baseball cap with an obscure film festival that no one's ever heard of on it, that one of my films was in 10 years ago. But International Media Ministries is part of the Assemblies of God World Mission. Pioneers is a non-denominational agency, and we just kind of work. You know, one of the things that I love about the creative arts, especially filmmaking, if you're a filmmaker, you can pretty much go anywhere in the world and get invited to do stuff. It's probably kind of like being a guitar player. Hey, can you know, it's one of those things. But what's amazing about that is the ability we have to collaborate. Film is an inherently collaborative art form. Okay, it's really hard to do something just by yourself if you're a filmmaker. So it's inherently collaborative, and so I just appreciate the chance to be here. Our vision as an entity, this actually comes from Byron. About 8 years ago, 2010, I was at a gathering like this in Colorado Springs. It wasn't officially the gathering, I don't think, but it was something like this in 2010. And I came away from that really encouraged by Byron to be thinking about my role in cross-cultural ministry as a filmmaker and as the arts, because I play guitar, I'm a worship leader at my local church, I'm a photographer as a hobby. I have to keep some things purely as a hobby, so I don't care if anybody else cares. It's just, who cares? I'm just doing it. I came up with something after I met with Byron in 2010, and I said that this is sort of the vision that I had for our team, and it's still in process. 10 years later, really, since we started our team, we will see imaginative human expression, the arts, become a key part of strategies for planting churches among unreached people groups. So church planting among unreached peoples, that's Pioneers. That's what my agency is all about, planting churches among unreached people groups. We will see the artists raised up to become church planters and have key roles in church planting teams to communicate the fullness of Christ and the gospel among all people groups. And it's actually kind of a radical thing. It may not seem radical here, but the idea of having an artist on a church planting team is kind of an odd thing for traditional mission agencies. They tend to be, you can be a Bible translator, you can do all sorts of like normal sort of, you could be a preacher, a Bible translator, all that. That's a missionary thing, right? And so you guys get this. When you say I'm an artist and I'm a missionary, people sort of go, I don't know. Or it's limited to like puppet shows that the youth group does in Mexico at Easter break, right? That's what I did when I was a kid, right? That's the extent of the arts, right? So bless it, but that's the end of it. What I on my team, what I would like to see develop, and it's something that we sort of ebb and flow, and even within Pioneers as a large organization, I had coffee on Tuesday with another guy from Pioneers. He lives in Chiang Mai, and he has a heart to see this idea spread out through our Pioneers movement, right? We're sort of the subversives within the bigger mainstream sort of mission agency, the same kind of things that we here at this gathering are thinking about. To see arts and artists be fully utilized as a part of communication of the gospel among unreached people groups. And as I see it, I'll just kind of go through these quickly. We see it through discipleship and nurturing equipping of artists, production of culturally relevant media resources, facilitation of arts strategies for church planting teams, collaboration and mentoring of majority world arts ministries and artists. So part of what I do is I train young filmmakers and screenwriters also, with both in my world, American kids and stuff like that, and also young people in other cultures. I've done training in Turkey and training in Asia and things like that to try to encourage them as visual storytellers. So I wanted to give that background because otherwise I'm sort of coming at you from like who knows who I am. But I wanted to talk about this idea of strategic storytelling, and this actually came of a conversation I had with Byron, probably by email, and he said, so have you been thinking about anything lately? It's kind of that, right? And when Byron says that, you throw something out, and then he said, hey, let's do a workshop. And so it kind of started with just me noodling on stuff. And so I stand up here sometimes thinking, I hope someone else is thinking the same thoughts, or is at least as kind to say, yeah, that's a good thing to think about. So we'll see where it goes. And I came up with this title, Strategic Storytelling, Oxymoron, Bad Idea, or Fruitful Path for Creatives. And because I'll talk about the tension that I feel sometimes. I want to start off with a story though first. In 2012, I had been at a conference training, doing a video production conference at a conference for scripture engagement. Most of the people were from Central Asia and countries in sort of the Middle East, Central Asia. We had about 25 students, and we were teaching filmmaking. And it was really good. But one event in that, there was a brief statement made by a guy who was in the class. It was a guy who lived in Baku in Azerbaijan. Okay, he's a scripture engagement guy, works for Wycliffe, SIL, in Azerbaijan, minority languages even within Azerbaijan. And it really stuck in my mind. And I had been, you can turn that down. That was down, sorry. I was flying home from this conference, and I had been trying to think about the future of our ministry. And we just come off of a big feature film project that we had finished. We shot a feature film in the Amazon. It was this multi-year project, millions of dollars, all that kind of stuff. And I had been pitching another film project in Turkey. We said, hey, my teammates and I, we were praying about what does God want us to do next, and we said, hey, what if we do another feature film in Turkey? Turkey is one of the most unreached countries in the world, 70 million people, only a few thousand evangelical believers in the entire country, one of the most influential countries in the Muslim world. And we said, what if we made a TV series or a feature film or something like that? And that was in my mind. But as I was coming home, I'm sitting on the plane and I'm writing my notes. And I'm thinking, okay, what has God been telling me? What has God been telling me? What has God been telling me? And I started writing some stuff down. And what he said, this guy from Baku said, it was an offhanded comment. In a couple of years, the only people who are going to have feature phones or dumb phones are old grandmas in the villages. And he sort of made that observation. And then it went away. But I somehow remembered that. God brought that back to my mind. And I'm sitting on the plane and I'm flying home and I'm thinking, what if I've been thinking about this all wrong? It wasn't an earth-shattering statement from him, but it was a little aside that God used to shift my thinking and my identity as a filmmaker. If I'm at a conference like this, I would probably introduce myself as a filmmaker, and I would say, I'll turn off the plane there. Just setting the stage. As I think of myself as a filmmaker, it's like a lot of us creatives. Sometimes it really becomes it's our identity. If I introduce myself, the simplest way to introduce myself is, hi, I'm Tom, I'm a filmmaker. Everybody goes, oh. Usually it's kind of a cool thing, right? If you're a musician or whatever, there's things like that. And so filmmakers make films. My identity as an artist, as a person, is driven by my creative work. So I assess myself by my creative output, right? And I'm also, I would say I'm not also what I would call a pure artist. I was sitting at lunch today. We were talking about this. Some people I believe are like, they're the stereotypical artists. Like they are driven by their art, and there's this drive to express themselves at any cost, and they'll starve themselves. It's the Jackson Pollocks of the world. It's that kind of a thing. I'm not really that. I'm not really driven by art for art's sake. Like I could just sit and work in a room and not care what anybody thought. The other thing is, I hope that I can, learn repentance and humility and all those kinds of things from the Lord to work in my life. But I also do have a purpose. There is a mission. We're missionaries, and so there's a mission. And so I wanted to talk about the tension that can create, the tension between this idea of strategic storytelling. And so I came up with this. This is a phrase that I started using just to sort of think about, like, what is it that I do? And the reason why it's a problem for me, or the thing that I'm wrestling with that maybe makes sense to anybody else, is usually, or there's a whole school of thought that basically says agenda equals bad art, right? You should not try to have a message in your art, right? You should not try to put a message in your film. That's what I'm taught. As filmmakers, when I teach screenwriting, it's like I try really hard, especially if I'm teaching young Christian filmmakers. They want to make really cheesy Christian movies. And so I am trying to dial it back, right? To say, how can we do this? But is an agenda always a bad thing? How do we think about strategically using stories? One of my favorite filmmakers is Andrei Tarkovsky, and you can leave the sound down on this one if it's not already muted. This is a scene from one of his films. Andrei Tarkovsky was a Russian filmmaker, Soviet filmmaker. Started working in the 1960s. One of the most revered filmmakers in history. He's one of the guys that you study in film school. And he also, later in his life especially, began expressing more of a Christian sort of perspective on it. I don't really know exactly where he's coming from, but he grew up in the Soviet Union and worked almost entirely in the Soviet Union. And he says that art should be there to remind man that he is a spiritual being. The allotted function of art is not, as is often assumed, to put across ideas, to propagate thoughts, to serve as an example. It says the aim of art is to prepare a person for death, to plow and harrow his soul, rendering it capable of turning to good. Wow, that's a very Russian thing, right? So Tarkovsky basically says, don't put messages in your films, right? And if you watch a Tarkovsky film, you won't have any idea what they're about. That's pretty much, they're about everything. So I'm imagining Hollywood. I'm imagining sitting in a pitch room, in front of some producers, and I'm saying, okay, I got this idea for a film. I want to plow and harrow a person's soul to prepare them, we're preparing them for death, right? So that's my pitch. And, it's not going to go very far. Here's my scene from Dante's Inferno. So is making, the message thing. The other thing, here's a famous thing. So Nikki this morning talked about Samuel Goldwyn, right? Shmuel Goldfish. Samuel Goldwyn, one of the moguls of the golden era of film, he said, if you want to send a message, use Western Union. Does anybody know what Western Union references? Okay, well, some of you do. So Western Union's like the telegraph. In the old movies, it's like, telegram from Mr. Smith, right? That's the Western Union telegram. So that's what he was thinking about. Now, if you want to send a message, I don't know, text him, something like that. His point of view, in the golden age of film, right, the MGM musicals is like, it's not about a message, it's just entertainment, right? And they made a lot of, they were very successful with that. So the question is, where's the balance in this? I guess that's sort of what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out how much of a pure artiste I can be, should be, what God's calling me to. How do we manage this as creatives who actually do have an agenda of some kind or a calling before God and some of the stuff we do? And I want to affirm some things, but when I got home from Germany, back to my story in Germany, I had a Skype call. And so I'm on a Skype call with the head of a foundation who's going to fund some project, maybe. Like, I'm looking for money. They fund media projects all over the Middle East. And very quickly in this Skype call, we had been sending proposals for a TV series or a feature film project, big project, hundreds of thousands of dollars at least, minimum. And pretty much, I'd been pitching that, and very, very quickly on this Skype call, they said no. It was like, we are not interested in funding any big film project at all. So I have to think, okay, well, and I was actually thinking on my feet, and it was a God thing. I basically started talking about what this guy had said in Baku in Azerbaijan, and the idea of that in 2.5 years or so, the only people who are going to have feature phones, dumb phones in Azerbaijan are the little old ladies in the villages. And it got me thinking about going totally the opposite. And this is what I was writing down on that plane flying home, long before the Skype call. What if we go low? What if we go grassroots? What if it's about multiplying? What if it's about local creation? What about it's about engagement? That word is a big deal. And I made a shift in my own thinking and my own identity to some degree. And it's upside down from what I had always thought of myself as a filmmaker. If we're successful, one of my friends who I work doing mobile production, mobile content creation training for people in the majority world. And he says, if we're successful in what we're doing, we're going to unleash thousands of mediocre filmmakers on the world. And I said, well, I have to say, well, how do I feel about that? Like, how do I feel about art and craft and all these things? And I began to debate and figure out how I describe myself. Am I a real filmmaker if I'm not making feature films? I just came off making a feature film. Why would I want to not do the big thing again, right? If you're a recording artist and you just made an album and all these stuff and you're on tour, why would you want to not do something that no one listens to and all that kind of stuff? What does it mean to be expressing my craft? Should I do it, or is there a strategy to what God is doing? So let me get into this. This is sort of one of the core kind of ideas that I want to talk about. Anybody know what this is called? It's a push me, pull you. Okay, this was from my childhood. It was a 1967 movie. I was a kid in 1967. From the movie Dr. Dolittle, Rex Harrison. And push me, pull you is a concept now that this is an image that I want you to stick in your mind when we think about strategic storytelling, okay? The reason why I think about the push me, pull you is the new media world. What I'm thinking about now is also, and the thing that I'm thinking about in terms of shifting my identity as a filmmaker is driven by the realities of the world we're in today. The world we call it the new media world. Now it's funny because every year it's the new media world. It's always new media world. I don't know when it becomes the old media world and gets replaced by another new media world. But how would we describe things? Think about the media channels and the content that you probably consume every day, maybe for hours and hours every day, right? This is the life a lot of us live. So it's driven by things like micro videos. It's driven by things like tweets. It's snaps. It's messaging. It is vlogging, right? Or blogging, vlogging, all those kinds of things. Augmented reality is a new thing that's growing and growing as a new thing. What about, let's see, what's the next one? Binge watching, right? Binge watching TV shows, love it. Gaming, things like virtual reality. What kinds of things do we see? What do these have in common? What traits do they have? So I want to ask the question. So for instance, what about schedule? In the new media world, what do we think about with schedule of things? Right, there is no such thing. It's on, the word she uses, on demand, right? Schedules don't matter anymore. It used to be, when I was growing up, you looked at the TV guide and saw what was on that night at 7 o'clock, and if you wanted to watch it at 8, you were just out of luck, right? What about devices? What has changed in the new media world versus the traditional kind of older media world? So many screens, what? Mobile devices, right? Everybody's got one of these. What about the amount of control the audience has? Huh? Yeah, when and where they want, right? So there's choice, there's some kind of control at least. You can't necessarily like shape your entire, there's still content being told, stories being told to you, but you have a lot of control about that. What about the opinion of the audience? In the old days of TV, how did people express their opinion about whether a show is good or not? Yeah, don't watch it, but if you were not a Nielsen family, you weren't one of the families that had one of those little electronic boxes in your house, you kind of felt like, well, I don't know, I don't watch that one, but everyone does, So it was the rating system in electronics. What about the length of content? What has changed with that? Okay, yeah. So the new media world is very, very different thing. There's this cloud of, I don't know why that's turning on and off all the time. Sorry. It's a very different world that we create content for. So when I was in film school 30-something years ago, my only choice was, my choice was have it in a cinema, right, in an actual movie theater, maybe on network television, but nothing, independent films didn't get shown on network television at all, right? Or VHS tapes, right? Home video was a thing. If I get in a Blockbuster or whatever. So it's the reality we have as content creators. And I want to give you a definition here of new media and kind of break down. So new media refers to on-demand access to content anytime, anywhere, on any digital device, as well as interactive user feedback and creative participation. So when I'm teaching about digital strategies and things, this is sort of a foundational kind of way that I think about describing the world. And I'll just kind of break it down. So it's on-demand access, right? People don't sit around and wait for something to go on. They look for it. They're searching it out, and they want to watch it when they want to watch it. Content anytime, anywhere. It's almost always on digital devices now, right? And they expect some degree of interactive user feedback and even some kind of creative participation. Now, you still don't get a lot of participation, but if you think of things like fan-created content, people are making Star Wars movies. People are making Harry Potter novels, cartoons, graphic novels, shows, all these things. And the keepers of content freaked out at the beginning of that, right? Don't touch our intellectual property. And they finally had to just give in and say, you know what, if our fans are making cheesy movies of our characters, they finally embraced it, right? The content creators owners finally embraced it. But it's a totally new thing for us as creators. What does this mean, though, for us as storytellers? Especially if we're thinking about purposeful gospel proclamation and stuff like that, because that is something that we intend. Most of us have some intention, usually a pretty high intention, to influence the world, for the kingdom. How do I adapt to this world? And the idea of push versus pull is something that I want to talk about, but I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean the story isn't important. Okay? The story is still something that we tell. What it means is that we engage our audience in new ways. And I emphasize that word engage because that really is the thing that I'm focusing on more than anything right now. So this idea of push versus pull is a concept. If we think of the push me, pull you, traditional media is what we call push media. It has a message that is going to go out. It's entertainment, it's news, it's Christian TV, sermons and things like that. and it's going out, and people need to hear it, so we're going to push it out. That's even been traditional Christian media. All media has been sort of a push thing, because there's no opportunity for a two-way kind of a communication. What's happening now in the new media world is that we need to be thinking more audience-centric and not as much message-centric. Again, it doesn't mean that the story, it doesn't mean there's not objective truth, there's not even maybe some propositions that we want to talk about with people, but it's not our message-centric. If it's your message-centric in what you're creating for new media content, you're probably not going to find the audience. The old days, you broadcast, and people would just turn on your TV channel. If they would stumble on it, there wasn't that many options. Now, people don't just turn on TV. They search for things. They follow links through this maze of YouTube and all this kind of stuff. They're looking for something, and so it has to be something that speaks to them, as opposed to purely our sort of a message. I want to show a little bit of I want to show an example of this. As a storyteller, I need to be thinking about this, like how does it shift my thinking as a storyteller? So it may be okay to begin with ideas for a story or an existing story like a biblical parable, and that is okay. Or I might begin with a conversation that I want to have with someone. A conversation I feel is important for them. So it is something that's being driven by my love for them, my care for them. They don't know the Lord, especially because I deal in cross-cultural contexts. If I begin with a story, what can I think about in terms of ways to make it more engaging in a new media context? I'm thinking about engaging, interactivity, inviting. These are words that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about not preaching and not message-centric, but audience-centric. In my Turkey example, we switched from an idea that we had as foreigners coming in saying, there's going to be a great gospel film created in Turkish that we will help spearhead. Now, we were smart enough, or hopefully experienced enough to say we'd have Turkish involvement. It's not going to be a bunch of Americans coming in doing it, but it was very much of a push. Like, we're going to go make a movie that they're going to listen to, and they're going to go watch it, and all this stuff. What we shifted to was this audience-centric approach, teaching young Turkish believers to create content that their friends would want to talk about, that kind of a thing. So I'll give you an example. So we need the audio up on the monitor again, or however that sound works. Sorry, Chris. So audio from the computer. Are we good? Oh, we're good?
شش لحسن يتقبض علينا.
لازم نلاقيه، ده اللي قاله اخوكي.
كانش المفروض اخليه يدخلني في الموضوع ده.
طيب المكان فوق هنا.
هو ده؟
ايوه هو.
هتفتح الباب؟
انا كنت باجي هنا كتير براقب المكان ده.
بس انت عارف ماما وبابا ممكن يقولوا علينا ايه؟
مش الأحسن نرجع؟
احنا ما جيناش هنا عشان نرجع، احنا جهزنا نفسينا كويس للحظة دي. بالمناسبة جبتي كتاب معاكي؟
ولستة الأسئلة كمان.
احنا عارفين ايه اللي هيواجهنا لو عملنا كده؟
بابا أصلا هددني زي ما مديرك عمل معاكي.
ما اقدرش اتراجع، احنا اتكلمنا في الموضوع ده قبل كده وطلبنا من الله الإجابات.
أيوة صح، كان في أسئلة كتير ما ينفعش نسألها، بس هنلاقي الإجابات هنا؟
ايوه انا متأكد ان احنا هنلاقي كل الإجابات ورا الباب ده.
بس انا مش عايزه اسيب اهلي واصحابي.
احنا مش هنسيبهم، احنا هنا بندور على الحق، واحنا كمان هنا عشان درسنا حياة السيد المسيح في الكتاب ده.
هو قال انا هو الطريق والحق والحياه.
هو برضو قال يجب ان تقرع كي يفتح لك.
اكيد لو فضلنا مع بعض مش هنحس بالوحده.
مع بعض.
So that's what kind of elements would you describe? What kinds of things do you see in that relate to sort of new media that we've been talking about? So curiosity, okay. What do you mean by curiosity?
Well, they were fearful and yet they wanted to know.
Okay. So so acknowledging, some of it's the story, it's acknowledging them. It's pretty short. It's 2 minutes long, basically. It has a very simple setting and a plot, right? These are really short, really quick turnaround. Actually, one of the principles that we try to do is let's not spend a huge amount of resource on these because we can create lots of content and be more responsive. If this doesn't work, we can just make another one, right? So it's not this massive kind of a production. 3 characters in there. And what did you notice about the ending? What?
I mean, it's not inconclusive, but you didn't see what happened.
Yeah, right. It's open. It's an open-ended sort of a thing, and it ends with a question, not a statement. And so, as we were thinking about this, this is how we think about all the content we create now. So we think about a very specific audience. As much as we want to reach an entire culture, our theology and our strategy reflects the fact that, the way the gospel spreads is through one seed planted that multiplies and things like that. So we're not necessarily in these spots trying to do what we call broad seed sowing. It's not broadcast. It's aimed at a very specific kind of an audience. It models things. Okay, one of the things that we're modeling is others are asking risky questions. So this is Egyptian Arabic. So this is aimed at an audience in Egypt, although it can be understood in all over in the Middle East, North Africa. Other people are also asking risky questions like you are. It's a huge thing for someone who's living especially in a persecuted culture to think, oh my gosh, I'm the only one thinking these bad thoughts, and if anybody finds out, I'm going to be in trouble, right? Hey, other people are thinking about this. It's okay. And doing it together. This is a huge thing. Evangelism quite often in the internet and radio and things like that in restricted access countries has been individuals coming to faith. They don't last long. They come to faith here, they come to faith here, come to faith here. They don't come with groups. They're natural affinity groups. So what we're trying to do is say everything about this campaign we do in the Middle East is about coming with your friends to talk about these things. Right? This one's pretty overt, actually, because it talks about Jesus. Very overt, I actually say Jesus, and we show a Bible and stuff like that and everything. A lot of the spots we do don't even talk about that. But it's an invitation to a conversation. And that's a really different kind of storytelling than an overt gospel presentation or something that has kind of a conclusion or a very specific kind of a call to action to it. And it reflects something. Here's another point. So the push me, pull you is one thing I want you to remember. Here's another thing that I think is helpful for us to remember. And we call it the 3 W's. In marketing, we talk about all these W's and stuff like that, and advertising and stuff have them. So in media ministry, we talk about 3 W's. The first one is who, second one is what, and the second one is where. There we go. And they aren't necessarily the things that we initially think of, okay? So here, I want to break these down for you. So the who is, who are they? But it is not demographics. It's not 18 to 34-year-old men living in the suburb. It's not that kind of a thing. It's more than that, okay? We want to identify an age and things like that. Most important is what kind of disruptions or dissatisfactions are they feeling? And what kind of questions may they be thinking about in their life, okay? In any culture, there's always people who are thinking about things that might even be unacceptable to think about, or they're questioning traditional belief systems, that kind of thing. And they also have a worldview. We want to think about the worldview. Why is the gospel good news to this person? It's different. I did a film in the Amazon with the Yanomamo Indians. The Yanomamo are an indigenous group. They're shamanistic, animistic people group. Their questions about God are very different than a Western European question, and which are different than a Chinese, or which are different from a Middle Eastern. Why is the gospel good news to them? So how do we shape those kinds of questions? So the who is who are they? The what is what are we inviting them to do? It's not what are they, it's what kinds of things are we inviting them to do? What kind of a thing could we have a conversation with them about? Could we begin a spiritual conversation? What's the intention of this story? Again, we're not necessarily trying to overtly share the gospel, we might say, let's start a spiritual conversation about some things, or let's begin to read Scripture together. Okay? The third one is where. And it's not where they live, it's where will they consume your media? Where will they connect with you? Is it in a group or is it private? Increasingly, media consumption has become a private thing. It used to be, there was a TV set. How many of you, like in other cultures, especially in other countries, not so much in America, but sometimes in America, like the TV set is always on. You go to places in Asia, you go to places like, and it's like that there's a TV just on, loud. Grandma's watching it probably, right? And it's just on all the time. Restaurants have got them on, everything's on. So there's much more public consumption of media. Now, if you go to these places, everybody's got their phones out. Right? So it's a private sort of a thing. And it changes how we can create content for them. What kind of device is it on, right? Is it on a tiny little screen, or is it on someone's home theater, or, in something? And then what kind of a channel is it? And again, we're talking about social media channels. How does Facebook content work differently than Snapchat content, or Instagram content, or Twitter content, or a regular website? How do we think about all these things, okay? So the 3 W's, the who, the what, and the where. What I'm trying to do is discipline myself to ask these questions with every story that I tell. It helps me shape a story, even if it's an original idea that I feel like God has given me, because what I don't want to do, I don't really want to be in the mode that I've been in the past, and sometimes it's the if you build it, they will come kind of a thing. It's hard to do that in the new media world. There's so many millions of channels. The idea of someone stumbling on your stuff is just really almost impossible. Even ranking high on search is a hard thing nowadays, right? Organic search if you're a social media person. So the idea of them of just creating something and then just throwing it out there. Now I have to say, God always. Every time I get sort of uppity like this and say, you should never do that, I acknowledge that God uses that all the time. God uses my badly thought through things and touches people's lives, and I am grateful for that. So I always feel a little bit of attention in that, because I've had friends. I have a coworker in Pioneers who literally got saved watching a TV evangelist late at night, in his apartment. He's drunk. It's one of those stories that you go, okay, that wasn't a very well-targeted campaign, but this guy got saved, some bad TV show, and I would say that's a bad strategy, but you know what? God uses it. So I have to repent every time I say something is a bad strategy, but I want to be thinking about this as much as I can. Here's what I want to do. I do want to be thinking about stories, and I do want to say that stories, I'm trying to create stories that don't try to do too much. I don't believe that stories, especially films, are really good at getting people saved. I think they're good at doing some kinds of things, but I don't think a movie gets people saved, except when my friend is drunk on his floor and a movie comes on and God saves him, right? So God does crazy things like that. But I think stories are really good at helping us think about things, asking them to do something to pull them in a fruitful direction. So that's kind of how I think about it. I'm not necessarily trying to close the deal. I'm not trying to get them saved. But I'm trying to draw them into a discipleship process for deep growth and discipleship and becoming a part of a church and all those kinds of things. So I'm trying to think of something like that. Now, actually, I get reports. I have to say, like that video, when it showed, no, it was the next video we did in this series, and I got an email from the follow-up people, and they say 26 people accepted the Lord today after watching that video. And I'm thinking, thank you, Jesus. I love hearing that, but boy, I cannot depend on that because I can't understand the whole fruit of what happens. So I'm thankful that sometimes God gives us a little bit and lets us know that something we're doing is fruitful, but I can't necessarily depend on that. Why do we do this? Again, new media. The audience has choices. We better not, we have to fit into their choices somehow. We can't just throw stuff out there and assume that they'll find it. We are asking them to do something. So in the context that I do ministry, we do stuff that is what we call high-level conversion. This is not marketing to sell someone a new pair of shoes. This is not even in a Christian context to get them to go deeper with the Lord. This is a person who's a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or an atheist or something like that, asking them to change their entire identity. The phrase that I like to use is changing their imagination of what could be. What could I be? I don't know anybody in my group of people who speaks my language who's ever become a Christian. How could that happen? So some of it is changing imagination is a phrase I like. And then calling for engagement and providing a channel for it. If I create content now, I don't want to ever create any content that just is out there with no thought about how it'll connect with an audience. And I've done that. I consult on films. I consulted on a feature film that was shot in Kosovo a couple of years ago. And one of the big things, a friend of mine was producing it, and I was one of the writers and an advisor on the editing and stuff. And I hammered him. He's a good friend of mine. I said, so dude, you want to make this movie? He's like, well, where is it? Who's going to see it? How is it going to be seen? What's your distribution plan? What's your engagement plan for your audience? And it kind of bugged him because God had given him this vision for this movie. And I just kind of said, okay, it's God's vision for your movie. God can give you a vision for distribution. And it actually is now being translated into like 14 languages. And it's like won film festival awards and all sorts of stuff. So God has really blessed that. Okay, I'm in Nashville. I'm going to quote T-Bone Burnett. Does T-Bone Burnett live in Nashville? Does he like live in some other odd place? It seems like he's the kind of guy that would be. Everybody knows who T-Bone Burnett is, don't they? Okay, Oscar winner now, right? I discovered him years and years and years ago when I have his EP album record, and stuff. So T-Bone Burnett's a guy I like to think about. So I'm going to quote a couple people. If Jesus is the light of the world, there are two songs you can write. You can write songs about the light, or you can write songs about what you can see from the light. That's what I try to do. So really interesting perspective. It's not always, and again, I don't want to negate clear gospel proclamation. I think God uses that stuff, but I think a lot of ways we can connect with people is through what we see as believers. The Holy Spirit speaks through us. Here's another quote from a guy named Steve Turner, who's an artist, wrote a lot about music people and has done some other things. This is a long quote. This violates my rule of PowerPoint, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's easy to state bare facts of the cross. The difficulty is to do it in a way that is consistent with the rest of our art and that engages our audience. I like that because it says the word engaged. It's easy to write a song that says, the Savior of the world died on a tree in order to save you and me. But how many people have their perceptions rattled by such language? Art should be helping us see things as if we had never seen them before. And I love that. That's that idea of changing imagination. So a young person in Egypt can see people talking about Jesus and go, really? That's not a song. It's a movie. I love this idea, though. I love the phrase, perceptions being rattled. I just think if I could rattle perceptions, that would be a great job, And partially, I think that's sort of part of what my ministry is. As I talk with media organizations like CBN and some of these organizations like that who are very traditional broadcasters. They're having a really hard time figuring this out because their whole life has been broadcast, push messages out, right? Pushing American content into other cultures, all this stuff. Traditional broadcasters have a really hard time making this transition, traditional media people like me, and this idea of changing imagination. For me, what does a storyteller do, with this? And I think one of the things I think about is how can I create a world and characters? I want to create a world and characters that makes the entire story makes a holistic argument that invites exploration. Okay? So the world I create, the characters I create are inviting people into a context where these thoughts come up, right? So here's my chance. It's a good thing in arts conference. You got to trot out C.S. Lewis in his bathrobe. C.S. Lewis is one of those people you stand up and this is what everybody says. We got to quote C.S. Lewis. This is actually a quote about C.S. Lewis by a guy named William Bauer, who's a professor at Regent University. He says, Lewis proposes that good art, good story, good myth will influence people through experience and imagination instead of through reason. So the influence should be a byproduct, not the prime product. And people look at Narnia now, Christians look at Narnia like, oh, he had this amazing allegory that he created and everything when he created Narnia. The reality was, it's all moonshine. I could never write it in that way. He did not start out writing the Narnia books as a gospel presentation. He says everything began with images, a fawn carrying an umbrella, a queen on a sledge, a magnificent lion. At first, there wasn't anything Christian about them. That element pushed itself in almost of its own accord, and it was part of the bubbling. I can imagine like this British dude saying, bubbling is part of the bubbling. So it wasn't something, it actually became more overt and a piece of it as he was going along, but it wasn't something that, that he had originally started. So as I'm thinking about my own mission and thinking about this and all the kinds of projects I've done, and I've done feature films, I've done TV shows, I've done really short video content, I've done documentaries and all these kinds of things, and I just find myself just continually trying to ask and learn myself, asking God what the question is, like, how can I be more strategic in the best possible way? Not that I should do stuff that doesn't mean anything. Although I do think, I will say, as an aside, I think that beauty is inherently glorifying to God. I think all truth is God's truth, all beauty is God's beauty, and so a person might accidentally, like unintentionally, give glory to God by creating something beautiful. And so I really believe that. So I don't want to get too pragmatic and utilitarian about it. But if we can keep in mind things like the 3 W's, if we have an audience, whether this is dance, music, visual art, anything, who are the people we want to talk with? What are we inviting them to do? And where will they consume our media? How do we shape it based on how they will consume it? That, I think, is a fruitful path for us. I want to end. I only got 4 minutes left, 3.5 minutes left, and I just want to kind of ask the question. I guess does this make any sense? Is there any pushback? Do you disagree? I'm still kind of wrestling through it, honestly, as a creative person, trying to figure out what the balance is. Because sometimes I get in a mode. Sometimes I get in a mode where I feel guilty because I'm one extreme or the other. I'm creating art that is whatever, I don't know, it comes out of me, but it's not purposeful enough. And in the Christian world, we can get obsessed with purposefulness and pragmaticness and utilitarian stuff. So then I swing back to the other side, and then I feel like, oh my gosh, this is like I hate this. Isn't really what God is putting on my heart. I'm being too, this is all Lego blocks when I write my story, and it's too manipulative of the audience and all these things. And so I wrestle with that as a creative person. I don't know if anybody else resonates with that. So what are the implications? I guess the question I want to leave you with is, what are the implications for your particular sort of art form? Are there is there anything in this that can be encouraging to you, can be a challenge? This is a work in progress for me, as I said, as a filmmaker, and I'm still kind of learning it. So, any questions, comments, anything? We got a couple minutes. Yes, comment. Go ahead. Man, you can't see anything up here. Right. I think so. The other thing that I realize, I'm trying, I think with age, I'm 56. So I know that I'm not a millennial. I know that I'm not like my daughter. I can try to be cool, but the more I try to be cool, the less cool I am, right? And so I have to be sure that I'm trying also. I think one of my responsibilities at my stage in ministry is that empowerment of the next generation. That's another giving up that I have to do. God is mainly, pretty much, I've given up trying to make films in Hollywood. I never really wanted to be in Hollywood. That was never part of my calling. But even making big films. So I'm content now making little films that no one will ever see except for, this audience in Egypt or something, and shifting my identity so that's okay. And that's a struggle sometimes, because my pride, I go to film festivals and go, I want to do that. I want to be a famous filmmaker. I also do the same thing with young. I want to be young. In my brain, most of you who are my age still, especially we're crazy, I think like I'm 30. And I tell my wife stuff all the time, and I say, let's do this. And my wife says, you are not 25 years old anymore. Hey, let's go live in my van, and we'll go, all this crazy stuff that I didn't even do when I was 25. But I have to understand that and say, okay, I'm okay if I'm not hip and cool and on the cutting edge, but what can I do to bless the next generation of filmmakers who are going to be cooler than me, going to be better designers than me, better musician than me, all these things. I have to kind of think about that. So that shift, that's a cross-cultural experience. And even if I'm talking with American high schoolers, I teach screenwriting and filmmaking for high schoolers. And it's the same kind of thing. I have to try not, they look at me like I'm their dad, and I want to be like their peer. Hey, let's make a movie together, And they go, you're like my dad. But in a cross-cultural experience, we always have to understand those limitations and embrace them and just say, I don't have to be this, I can be this. This is how God made me now in this season of my life. Any other comments? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question is about, so here's how I would describe that. The culture of the church is quite often not very aesthetically sophisticated. That's one way to say it, right? Lowest common denominator in everything in like American evangelical church. It can tend to be that. You don't see, and so sharing this kind of vision with people who consume sort of mediocre pop culture as their standard, it can be hard, or just a very utilitarian culture. So I've had people. So when one of my films was in film festivals, we deliberately didn't show the film in any Christian film festivals for about a year. It was all secular film festivals and things. So we avoided getting hit by Christians because I was tired of pastors saying, "Brother, there's no clear presentation of the gospel in that movie, so I don't know if I can support it." And it was that kind of a thing, and it can be really discouraging. I don't know what the answer is. I hope that over time, God continues to raise up fine artists who are rigorous in their craft and disciplined and gifted and all these things, and it rises up and people start to notice and go, oh, we should have that in our church. I don't know whether, I think it comes from influence, like any kind of a change like that, there has to be some realization that what we're doing isn't working. And I don't know whether we get that very often in churches. We kind of get into our mode, and this is what we do, and we do it, and we've always done it that way. What happens, in order for someone to feel like they need to change, you need to be unhappy with the status quo, right? And it's really hard to get someone unhappy with their own status quo. It's possible. Prayer, God does it. God stirs us up at different times, and he'll stir up the church in different places and things like that. And you have churches like Mosaic and places like that who sort of, get stirred up once in a while, and then Mosaic will get old and creaky, and then it'll be some new young kid on the block, and no one will want to go there anymore, and it's like but sometimes it's vision. To me, it's vision casting. I think we have to be in the church and just bless the church and say, thank you, brother. Hopefully, we can love each other, and I don't get critical. It's really easy for me to get critical, and I just don't want to be in that mode. Any other comments, questions? Sure. No, I think that's a great idea. So the idea of helping someone who doesn't really get it as well, giving them tools is a great thing. I think so that you want engagement, but if we just say, here it is, take it or take it, that's kind of a pure art. That's what Tarkovsky would do with his films. I'm not going to explain what my film's about. It's about whatever you want it to be about, right? That's art. I think we can take a step in helping people engage without making it overtly preachy and wrap it all up in a bow. Here's how you can ask. So even if it's simple as questions, here's some questions the pastor can have people ask after this presentation. What do you guys think? And I trust the audience a lot. Even if I think the audience is normally feeding on bad pop culture, people can still get stuff, right? I don't have to sit there and say, I'm an artist and they won't understand me. Help them along, help the pastors, help people engage with your story. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think.